So set 10 has been out on the live servers for about a couple of days now, and set 10, we are already seeing people struggling, climbing, and especially trying to pivot their board from one lane to another. It's a very much more skill expressive set compared to set 9. If set 9, by the way, a lot of you have been coming by my stream being like, hey Kai, like I hit Masters, I hit GM for the first time, set 9, feeling really good, and then set 10 hit, feels like you got hit by a truck, you don't know what the fuck is going on. And quite honestly, it's understandable. It's actually a very common thing for a lot of people. And in today's video, we're gonna try and help alleviate that problem a little bit by talking over this one particular thing that a lot of pro players and a lot of high elo players are utilizing in order to try and pivot their board almost seamlessly. So that's what we're gonna be going over in today's video. But without further ado, let's just talk about it, okay? So the trick is clusters. Clusters is a term that I've coined personally, but if you've been watching the headliner series that I've been posting over the past like 2 weeks during the PvE cycle, which I mean, a lot of you probably did it. It's just like info dumping really. But if you weren't watching it, totally understandable. I feel ya. But basically, clusters are a small core group of units, basically 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 6 units that you can basically say, hey, like I know this cluster exists, this core exists. These units work very synergistically well with each other. And then once you have those, 3, 4, 5, 6 units together, then you can go, okay, maybe I can pair it with a different cluster, or I can just build around it and then just build my board this way. Maybe 2, 3 extra units that just have to flex in, right? And by utilizing and memorizing these small little bits of it, like groups of units, you kind of go like, hey, I already know these 6. So now I just have to build like 2 or 3 extra units, whatever I find, right? Maybe I have like 1 out of 2 Sentinel open. Okay, I'll just put another one. Or maybe I have 2 out of 4 Guardian. Why not just put an extra 2 Guardians in there, right? It makes it a lot easier. So you're not thinking about your whole board holistically, but rather you're just thinking about 2 or 3 extra units that you just have to pop in there, and then it makes transitioning a lot easier. It's gonna take a lot of time. Just because you understand the concept doesn't mean you'll be able to get it down immediately in your games, okay? But today, we're going to go over some clusters, early game, mid game, late game clusters, and then think about ways to approach these so that you can utilize them in your own games, and hopefully they'll help you when you're pivoting your board so you don't feel so dizzy and lost whenever you're transitioning your boards. So let's get on to the first one. And the first one we're going to talk about is the superfan cluster. The superfan one, this one specifically, we're going to talk about with Kennen chosen with 2 superfan. The reason why I'm talking about this one first is because this is the most broken right now. It's very strong, and you can actually sometimes tempo with this one all the way to stage 5-1. It's actually so disgustingly strong. The main reason is because Kennen 2 is such a strong fucking unit because of the way that his ability and traits work. Specifically, Superfan gives him a free Vow, which is already really great. But if you get 5 Superfan, that gets upgraded. It gets upgraded into a Radiant Vow, and then you can just smack him with a bunch of good items, things like Sunfire for the early game, maybe a Steadfast Heart for some tempo, right? And suddenly this thing's like unkillable. It's unkillable, and you get to just kind of flex whatever you want in the backline here. And because of his bling bonus when you have true damage active, let's say for example you are playing around a Senna during the mid game, right? You have true damage enabled, and suddenly Kennen is not only stunning 1 unit, he stuns 2. So this rat is fucking strong, and you can often see a lot of pro players just saying like, hey, I hate Kennen plus 2 superfan, the game's fucking over, I already won the game. Because it's very easy to hit 5 superfan, it's very easy to play around, very easy to flex around. So if you ever get this very strong opener, keep that in mind. Also, by the way, I'm just gonna point this out real quick. All the clusters we're gonna talk about today, we're not gonna go over every single one that exists in the game, because the video would be like 4 hours long. I'm not gonna do that. Also, I don't know all of them. I'd have to be making some on the fly, and it's hard. Okay, it's a lot of information. But we'll go over the most popular ones, but also maybe some that are maybe not as meta right now, but it's very possible they'll become meta in the future. So just keep them in mind. This is just to give you an idea, warm up the brain. But anyways, Superfan, you get the idea. Another one I'm going to talk about is 4 Bruiser. I think 4 Bruiser is also a really strong opener that you can play around in general. The idea is that if you get any +2 Bruiser for your headliner during stage 1 and maybe 2-1, you can just flex 4 Bruiser in your front line, you level to 4, and you play whatever unit in the back. And basically, you have such a tanky front line that your backline unit is just going to be able to put in the work. And just early game stage 2, when your front line is just just the Great Wall of China, right? Like, your opponents are going to have a lot of difficulty breaking through that to try and kill your board before like OT hits and your single carry in the back is able to just like win out. Now, obviously, this is a lot stronger when you get to level 5, because once you're level 5, suddenly now you can play 2 units and you can be like, oh, now I can play 2 big shot in my backline, and suddenly my backline's like not that fake anymore, and you're chilling. But obviously the glaring issue is, hey, 2-1 to 2-3 can be a bit of a problem, but that's okay. You can actually baby level pretty often when you're running this board, especially if you win 2-1, because you know your level 5 board is just so goddamn strong. So if you know you have rapid fire lined up for you waiting just to be put onto your board, you can consider baby leveling at 2-2 or 2-3 just to, you know, just get those units in there so you can guarantee your basically free 5 streak. So again, really, really strong board that you can play around any +2 chosen. Tom Kench, Olaf are the 2 common ones. Again, if you get the +2 bruiser, it's just super, super free. 4 bruiser, super tanky. So very, very fun to play around. Also, don't sleep on Olaf. If you have like a Sterax and a BT slam, by the way, just slam it on Olaf. Olaf can do some good stuff during stage 2. So keep that in mind. He's actually really, really fun to play around. But I do want to mention this, like I said before, if you are playing the 4 bruiser, you'll notice, again, playing something like a Corki, it can feel kind of bad. Right? There are a couple of early games, and I don't really want to call them clusters because they're singular units, but depending on the headliner effect, you can actually sort of just like flex a singular carry in the back. So for example, any 2 with +2 emo, super fucking strong in the early game. And you can just basically utilize this in the early game and be like, hey, I have an NA2, I can flex whatever the fuck I want on the front line, doesn't matter, I have an NA2, I know I'm going to be chilling. So things like a Guardian frontline, right? Something like this, right? And then, or maybe you can find like the bruisers like from earlier that we're talking about, and you can flex something, it doesn't matter. The whole point is, though, is that any 2 with +2 emo is super, super strong. Definitely something you can consider. And if you have any 2, just flex whatever you want up front. Same thing with actually Jinx 2, or any rapid fire 2, or any actually big shot +2. They're definitely considerable for copying them throughout the early game, especially during stage 1. I've seen people take Jinx with +2 rapid fire and play it throughout the early game. If it's good enough for Casper, it's good enough for me. Bro is like top 10 North America. I've seen him take Jinx +2 rapid fire, which was kind of an uncommon opinion, I think, at the time, at least a couple days ago. But nowadays, I think people are starting to realize that she's actually pretty strong. So that is definitely something you can consider for like the AD lines. Again, any of these can actually just solo by themselves. You find an Aphelios with +2 rapid fire, or a Senna with a +2 rapid fire as well, or actually +2 true damage as well. Is actually super strong with her. Very easy to just flex these onto your board and just flex whatever you want in the front line. Again, Superfan is like the big thing right now that a lot of people are talking about. So what you can actually do, funny enough, is that these actually work incredibly well with Superfan. So let's say you play this with like a Superfan frontline, like we were talking about earlier, and you're super chilling. Like your early game is basically free. You have a board like this for like stage 2, even stage 3, you just get like 2, let's say, let's say you just put in like 3 KDA, for example. Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, I mean, I'm just making shit up right now. But you can even have like a board like this, and it's still super strong for stage 3. So, again, just keep it in mind. Something to consider. I think these early game openers are very, very nice clusters to be thinking about whenever you're playing throughout the early game. Moving on, mid-game clusters. Now, this is sort of where we're going to start getting into sort of the nitty-gritty, right? Because now we're not just... Early game is like, okay, that's basically your board. Like, your whole board's kind of like that. It's almost like memorizing an early game comp, right? Now we're starting to get into clusters where it's like, okay, now you guys start being a little more flexible about the way that you approach things, right? First one, again, Superfan. Superfan, you'll notice it's going to pop up a lot, but we do have to talk about some of the meta ones, right? Superfan, again, when you have it in the early game plus an Ekko, Ekko just fits so well because you get, again, the bling bonus for cannon. We talked about this earlier, but also Sentinel, which is super nice. It fortifies your front line quite a bit. 2 Guardian with the Nico, it fits super beautifully. Again, you can flex whatever you want in here. You can flex things like the rapid fire, like we talked about earlier, with the Senna +1. You can do things like KDA with Spellweaver. You could do like a Seraphine carry for your mid game, and then adding like a KDA unit. Just kidding. Spellweaver unit. And just have something like this for like your mid game, and that's totally okay. That's a lot of frontline though, so maybe something like this. You know, you get the idea. It fits very beautifully on 6. But just keep it in mind, you have a bunch of options to flex around. If you're just using this as your frontline, it's a really strong mid game board to have. And it's actually, I think this is one of the biggest defaults, I think, for mid game. If you can get to here because you found Superfan early, pivoting into this feels super great. Again, another one to talk about real quick. I know, again, it's Superfan, but the main thing to focus here is actually Garen 2 headliner. Garen 2 headliner with, I believe this is 8-bit, but Sentinel's totally fine. It does not matter. But the idea is that Garen Chosen is actually a bit of a crank. This unit is actually super fucking strong. So what you can do is that you get the headliner +2 for, like, doesn't matter, again, with Garen, 8-bit or Sentinel. I think 8-bit's the preferred one, actually, funny enough, because Sentinel is already satisfied with Lilia. You don't even need the superfan here, though. This is just for, like, a reference. You can actually, like, completely drop this shit, and you can just do this with, like, if, let's say you found the Sentinel one instead, and you just went with like 4 Sentinel, and like that's totally fine. I can flex whatever you want in the backline. Big shot, rapid fire, spell weaver. It does not matter. You have a bunch of options available to you. You can play 4 Sentinel throughout your mid game, and that's totally fine. Again, this is a very core unit to play around, and just something to consider when you're playing on the mid game. Just a Mordekaiser, Garen, Ekko, or Mordekaiser, Garen, Lilia, right? Sentinels that you can consider throughout the early game that you may want to play around, just because it's so tanky in the front line. Flex whatever in the back line. It is what it is. Very good stuff in the mid game. Another one to consider is actually 4 Guardian for your front line. I don't know why this is 3 out of 4. It should be 4 out of 4. But basically the idea is that 4 Guardian is also very, very tanky throughout the mid game. So you might also notice a common theme here. A lot of it is like your back line, your front line is more important throughout the early and mid, and then the late game we'll talk more about the clusters that you might want to focus on throughout the late game. You want to kind of flex whatever you want for your backline carries throughout the mid game. But 4 Guardian is another thing. Really, really strong, really, really great. Again, any +2 Guardian, it makes total sense to play around a board like this, right? 4 Guardian, flex whatever you want in the backline. Again, rapid fire is very, very popular right now. Things like big shots, totally okay with Jazz and maybe with the Bard, and you know, maybe flex into MF reroll from that spot, right? Very, very available as well. Now moving over to sort of like a mid game / late game is the Karthus, Akali, Mordekaiser, Gnar. This is a very, very common core you're seeing these days because Karthus Akali is such a popular combination. But as long as you remember, Karthus likes Mordekaiser, and with Gnar gives you 3 pentakill, and then Akali super chillin'. Obviously, if you hit like +2 pentakill, then maybe you want to consider 5 pentakill, or maybe you want to drop out of the Gnar, right? The idea is that basically, no matter who your headliner is, though, Gnar is really nice in here because it opens up superfan, so you could maybe consider superfan in this line, so you could do like the Lilia and the Nico. It gives you KDA as well. Super easy to flex into. Another thing to consider, though, is that you want to remember that it's always going to be Mordekaiser in the front line for your pentakill, and not Ekko for Sentinels. And the reason being is that if you put Ekko in as your Sentinel whenever you're playing around Akali, she will become true damage, and that will become a problem. You always want to keep, as of right now, the KDA Akali, because the KDA Akali spell is just so much better than the true damage version of her spell. So keep that in mind. Again, Mordekaiser, Gnar, Karthus, Akali, very solid core to play. Obviously, the Gnar, as the game progresses, it's going to become into a Yorick, but again, this is the mid game, not the late game, so just something to keep in mind. And the last one I want to talk about for like the mid to late game is going to be this Ahri, Ekko, Seraphine, Lilia. The Lilia is actually a bit out of place. This can actually be any KDA unit. It's really these 3. And then these 3 sort of set up a very strong core that you can play around whatever you want. So, for example, we want to obviously fulfill 3 KDA, right? So, for example, let's go back to Lilia, for example. If we choose Lilia, this opens up Superfan, and this immediately makes our board really easy to play around. We already know what else we could put in here. Maybe a Mosher, maybe a Guardian. If you are prudent, you might notice that Yorick fits the bill super nicely, and things like Pentakill, right? Things start opening up. You have a bunch of different options that start to occur. Things like Ahri, Karthus is like an option, right? Very cool, but again, it stems from this idea of playing around this core, filling 3 out of 3 KDA, and then building around it, right? Another very popular example is just Ahri Akali. You just play straight up into the vertical, and you just keep playing and building around it. You obviously want the Sentinels to complete because you need a bit of a front line regardless, right? And then maybe you just play into something like 5 KDA. Totally understandable, right? Something like this makes a lot of sense. You also have other lines that are available to you as well. Things like, let's say you fulfill it using Nico. Again, opens up Superfan, which is super nice, but this actually opens up Guardians, which opens up the Amumu, which then opens up Poppy as a potential duo carry. Again, really cool line, but again, these all stem from the original core, which is Ahri, Seraphine, Ekko, and then once we have these 3 core units in place, we go, okay, what can we build from there? If you really wanted to, you could even take this a step further, be like, okay,
Ahri Seraphine. How do we build from here, right? Maybe let's not think about KDA, let's think about Spellweaver. How do we want to fulfill that? Maybe we want to think about Gragas, right? Gragas, well, why Gragas? Well, it opens up Bruiser. Bruiser opens up Set, which is pretty nice because now we want to start thinking about, okay, now with Bruiser, but now Mosh is open, so we want to open this up. Then we want to fulfill KDA, which we fulfill with Nico, which opens up Guardian Emo, which opens up the Amumu, right? We have different ways to keep building. Again, the set, very, very flexible, but you gotta think about these core clusters first and then build around them. And again, it's very difficult to do when you only got like 30 seconds, 40 seconds to try and like pivot your board, but that's what makes TFT so competitive and so enjoyable. So again, very, very cool clusters to be considering. Definitely something to be, you know, keeping in mind when you're trying to pivot your board, transition your board throughout the mid game, throughout the late game, and then trying to see where to go from there. Again, a lot of cool stuff that you can play this set, and again, easily one of the best sets of all time. Really love this set. Thank you to the Dead team. But now let's move over to the late game clusters, and the big one we'll talk about is the Lucian Bard Ziggs one. This is like the biggest cluster that everybody talks about, especially at higher elo, because this is sort of where you always want your board to end up with. Ziggs is sort of the premier endgame carry of the current set in terms of AP damage, so you always kind of want to end up with a Ziggs 2 at some point if you're playing flexibly, right? You're playing standard, not playing reroll. Bard is really nice because he gives the Dazzler for Ziggs, but also gives up one open for Jazz, and Lucian is really nice because he fulfills that tree. Plus, when you have Jazz inside your board, you just get to play as many different verticals, many different lines as you want, and just keep stacking up that bonus damage that you get from the Jazz trait. Now, obviously, Lucian is not the only one you can sort of end on. There is a second cluster we can talk about, which is the Jhin Misfortune Bard Ziggs. Now, depending on the headliner effect, maybe for example you hit a Jhin 2, right? You hit the Jhin headliner and the headliner happens to be bigshot, right? If that is the case, you don't even need the Misfortune. And again, super chillin', totally fine. Very, very plausible to do this as well. I guess technically speaking with the Lucian, you don't actually need rapid fire, but I mean, again, if it's the headliner and it's plus rapid fire, it just completely fulfills itself. Frontline, flex, whatever. Same thing here, frontline, flex, whatever. But just because in the mid game and the early game the front line is super important and maybe late game is not as important but still important, we can talk about this other cluster for your end game, which is going to be the Yorick Thresh Set Alawi cluster. This is probably, again, one of the strongest clusters that you can have, in my opinion. The idea being is that Thresh 2 is like a pretty strong tank. Not the tankiest of tanks, but very, very strong and fulfills Guardian for Yorick. But also you get the Moshes from Set, but this opens up Bruiser for Alawi, she is like the premier tank of the set. Very, very strong. If you have an Alawi 2 on your board, your opponent is going to have a very difficult time getting through her, especially when she is fully itemized with a bunch of crazy items such as Crown Guard, such as Declaw, such as Redemption, etc. You get the idea. Very, very, very tanky unit to be ending on, and this just again opens up actually a leeway into a secondary potential carry with Yorick. The idea is that Yorick 2 is actually a strong secondary carry. You can think of him as like a bruiser, so things like BT, things like Sterax, things like Hodge work really, really well on him, and he's able to just do a bunch of work on your endgame boards. So even though yes, this is your frontline talking, it's still very, very fun. The tentacles, by the way, they are positioned here in the corner specifically because Akali is such a popular unit right now, but you don't have to position them like this. You can do something like this as well. Basically, Akali dashes the tentacle in the back, then dashes back and forth between these two because they are the two furthest apart, and you are chilling. Just obviously don't pocket a unit at C1. That will make things a little harder. This is just, again, an example if you put the two clusters together, and you might notice that, hey, we're only 7 units. So if we're only 7 units, play 2 fucking more. And it doesn't matter. It can be whatever. We're 2 out of 2 Guardian. Why not just make it fucking 4? Just find that Pantheon 2 you've been playing the whole game within a Mumu. Boom. Bada bing. You're done. Right? Or maybe instead of this, maybe you're just more of a Mosher kind of guy. Maybe you ended up finding the very early Yorick 2 and you just have to play 2 extra Moshers on your board and fill that instead. Totally understandable, right? Again, the idea is that like you want to be utilizing these clusters, know what they are, and then just be like, okay, I'm just gonna flex these last 2 units in here. Bing bong, problem solved, right? Ooh, that rhymed. That's pretty sick. So again, these are the late game clusters that a lot of people are talking about, but there's one final one I want to quickly touch upon, which is for crowddiver. Now, this is 7 units, which is my fault. That really shouldn't be the case, but the idea is pretty simple. You want to be playing around 4 crowddiver, ideally if you find the Kiana +2 on crowddiver specifically, or maybe you're playing around a Z2 crowddiver somehow and you tempo to 9 with that. I mean, props to you. I don't know how to do that, but if you did it, congratulations. But the idea is very, very simple. 4 crowddiver is super fucking strong right now, and if you can have 4 on your board with a Kiana 2, this Kiana 2 will do some very disturbing work. I don't think people understand just like how disgustingly strong Kiana is. It's a little difficult and a little awkward to play around her because you kind of do need specific items on her. She does like the Titans and the BT and the Hodges, like the same items as Yorick, but she also does like having IE quite a bit. So just keep that in mind. She's also, again, 4 crowddiver is sort of the key point here. 6 is actually low-key broken. Like 6 actually, if you fought 6 crowddiver Kiana 2 before, you are going to have a bad time. But 4 is sort of the main idea, and the reason why is because 4 is sort of more realistic to hit, but also because 2 does fucking nothing. 2 crowddiver is sort of like this sort of like almost fake trait. It almost never does anything on your board. But once you have 4, the percentage bonus damage spiking up to 30% is fucking enormous. It's massive. So there's a penis joke somewhere. I don't know where it is. I'm very sleep deprived at the moment. I don't know if you can tell throughout the recording, but I'm very sleep deprived. I'm going to take a fat fucking nap after this one. But anyways, before I got extremely sidetracked, 4 crowddiver, large, humongous, massive. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Anyways, that's gonna basically do it for this video. I hope this was helpful. I will see you guys very, very soon for a meta-analysis, which I'll probably be posting later today after I wake up from my nap. And until then, I will see you guys all later. So take care, guys. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to please leave them below down in the comments, and I will see you guys all later. Take care, guys, and happy climbing.